Boston's elite flocked to the Coconut Grove, trusting its velvet ropes and glittering lights to offer refuge from wartime fear, unaware the club's owner, a man with political muscle and underworld ties, had built a fortress of illusion and danger. Officially described as impossible to threaten, the Grove's dazzling reputation hid a maze of locked doors, suffocating crowds, and warnings no inspector dared enforce. How did the safest place in the city become the site of America's deadliest nightclub fire? The truth was built into its very walls, if you know where to look. The Coconut Grove opened its doors in 1927, nestled among the theatres and hotels of Boston's Park Square. By the early 1940s, it had become the city's most sought-after escape, a place where the world outside, with its ration lines and blackout drills, seemed to vanish behind a wall of palm fronds and satin. On any given night, the club filled with the city's best-dressed film stars in town for a show, Navy officers on shore leave, young couples celebrating a furlough, and business leaders eager to be seen. The press called it Boston's answer to Hollywood, a tropical paradise where the rules of wartime living could be put on pause, if only for a few hours. Inside, the club's South Seas decor was more than just a theme, it was a promise. Artificial palm trees brushed the ceiling, paper flowers and lacquered wood gleamed under coloured lights, and the air carried the scent of cocktails and perfume. Even the city's blackout orders, imposed after Pearl Harbor, could not dim the Grove's glow. Heavy drapes and painted windows kept the outside world at bay, letting the party continue long after the streets had gone dark. Wartime regulations meant no neon signs outside and strict limits on visible light. But inside, the effect was almost theatrical, a secret and protected world. A survivor would later recall that you felt safe there, like nothing bad could happen, not in a place like that. Patrons trusted the Grove's velvet ropes and uniformed doormen, believing that the club's reputation and connections made it untouchable. The name Wolanski, the owner, was whispered with a certain respect. He was known to have friends in high places, both in City Hall and beyond. For the regulars, that meant the best tables, the best bands, and a sense of security that felt absolute. But the glamour was only skin deep. The club's floor plan was a patchwork of expansions and hidden rooms, each new addition squeezed into the existing structure without regard for safety or code. Narrow hallways twisted around the main ballroom, and the lush decorations so inviting to guests concealed doors, blocked windows, and made the space feel smaller than it was. Staff were trained to keep up appearances, to maintain the illusion of order and exclusivity, even as the crowds pressed in. On Thanksgiving weekend 1942, the city was buzzing. The Navy had docked 19 ships nearby, flooding Boston with sailors eager to celebrate. Wartime restrictions had left people hungry for release, and the Grove was the promised land. That night, the club pulsed with music and laughter, every table full, every corridor crowded. The sense of safety was so complete that no one noticed the warning signs, until it was far too late. Barnett Barney Wolanski did not operate in the shadows. His influence radiated from the heart of Boston's political and social circles. Wolanski's name appeared in city records alongside that of Mayor Morris J. Tobin, a personal friend and frequent guest at the club. Wolanski's ties extended beyond City Hall. He had long-standing relationships with organized crime figures whose financial backing helped transform the Coconut Grove from a modest speakeasy into a thriving, high-profile destination. Press clippings from the late 1930s and the early 1940s described Wolanski as a businessman with a gift for friendship and a knack for smoothing over regulatory trouble. Complaint logs from the Boston Fire Department tell a different story. Over the years, inspectors received repeated warnings about blocked exits, overcrowded rooms, and questionable renovations. Yet enforcement actions were rare. Records show that violations were often noted but not pursued, citations issued and then quietly withdrawn. In several cases, inspectors returned within days of a complaint to sign off on conditions that had not changed. The club's licensing files reveal a pattern. Applications were pushed through despite missing paperwork, inspections scheduled at off hours, and complaints closed with little or no follow-up. The protection extended to the club's day-to-day operations. Police reports mention incidents where fights or thefts were handled internally, with no charges filed. When fire inspectors raised concerns about the club's labyrinthine layout or the use of flammable decor, their warnings rarely translated into penalties. Wolanski's connections insulated the Grove from the kind of scrutiny that shuttered lesser clubs. This environment allowed hazards to accumulate unchecked. Unauthorized additions crept into the building, and safety shortcuts became routine. Staff understood that the priority was not compliance, but continuity. Keep the doors open, keep the revenue flowing, and keep the right people happy. The Grove's reputation as untouchable was not just a matter of social status. It was the result of a carefully maintained network that shielded the club from meaningful oversight. When tragedy finally struck, the pattern of protection and leniency was laid bare. The records showed that the very people trusted to enforce the rules had for years looked the other way. Wolanski's network had bought the club time that ran out on a single crowded night. On the night of November the 28th, 1942, the number of people inside the Coconut Grove far exceeded what the building was ever meant to hold. Official records listed the club's legal capacity somewhere between 500 and 600. But by the time the show was set to begin, estimates put the crowd at over 1,000, double the limit. Some witnesses described guests packed shoulder to shoulder, with barely enough room to move between tables, and lines of people already pressed against the walls before the main wave of patrons arrived. The ticket stubs and nightly receipts never told the full story. Reports from employees and guests suggest that undercounting was routine, with the club's management downplaying attendance to avoid scrutiny. This was overcrowding. The building's layout only made things worse. The elaborate tropical decorations, fake palm trees, heavy drapes, and low-hanging fabric ate into the usable floor space, turning wide rooms into narrow corridors. Floor plans from before the fire show a maze of small, interconnected rooms, each with its own set of doors and partitions. But many of these so-called exits were useless in an emergency. Some doors were locked from the outside to keep non-paying guests from slipping in. Others were hidden behind curtains or false walls, invisible to anyone who did not already know where to look. These blocked ways became critical when time mattered, a failure of exits. The main entrance on Piedmont Street was fitted with a revolving door, the kind that allows only one or two people through at a time. Fire inspectors had raised concerns about this bottleneck, but the design remained. For those in the basement Melody Lounge, the only way out was a single narrow stairway leading up to the crowded first floor. Every shortcut, every hidden passage, and every locked door turned the club into a trap. By the time the fire started, the path to safety was already blocked by bodies and barriers, long before anyone realized they needed to escape. This was a trap. Artificial palm trees lined the walls, their fronds made from celluloid and paper, layered over wooden frames. Satin drapes hung from the ceiling, gathered in thick folds, and fiberboard panels painted in tropical scenes covered much of the club's interior. Beneath the stage and along the walls, peroxylin-coated leatherette gave a glossy finish. But this material, common in the 1930s, was known to emit flammable gases when exposed to heat. The Broadway Lounge, remodeled just weeks before, featured new wall coverings and fresh lacquer, but records of the exact materials used are missing from city archives. The official story points to a single moment. A 17-year-old busboy named Stanley Tomaszewski was working in the Melody Lounge. According to trial transcripts, Tomaszewski was asked to replace a light bulb that had gone out above a table. He struck a match, reached up, and the next thing witnesses recalled was a flicker in the artificial palm leaves. Flames appeared to leap to the ceiling in seconds, yet other accounts challenged this version. Some patrons insisted the first flames erupted near the bar, nowhere near Tomaszewski. Others described seeing fire break out in the main dining room at almost the same time. Investigators found evidence of methyl chloride, a highly flammable refrigerant that was used in the club's air conditioning system as a wartime substitute for Freon. The condenser unit sat behind thin walls close to the Melody Lounge. If a leak occurred, the gas could have seeped into the false ceiling, mixing with the volatile compounds released by heated pyroxylin and lacquer. The combination of these materials created conditions ripe for a flash fire, where a single spark, whether from a match, faulty wiring, or static discharge, might have been enough to ignite the entire room. The busboy's story became the easy answer, but the chemistry inside the grove tells a more complicated tale. The rapid spread of flames, the multiple points of ignition described by survivors, and the presence of accelerant-like materials all suggest that the fire's origin cannot be pinned to a single careless act. The question of what really happened in those first moments remains unsettled, buried beneath layers of lost records and conflicting testimony. Under 5 minutes. That is how long it took for the fire to sweep from the Melody Lounge through every corner of the coconut grove. Witnesses described smoke drifting along the ceiling one moment, and then, in what felt like a single breath, a wall of flame racing overhead. Some recalled hearing a low roar, others saw the lights flicker and then vanish, but nearly all agreed on the speed, faster than anyone thought possible for a building of that size. Fire science models from later decades struggled to match the timeline. The materials inside the club were flammable: paper, satin, lacquered wood, but the spread still defied expectations. Investigators studying survivor accounts and floor plans noticed a pattern. The fire did not just move horizontally from room to room, it seemed to leap, fueled by unseen forces. The false ceiling in the Melody Lounge, installed to hide pipes and wiring, created a hidden plenum above the crowd. When the first flames reached this space, they ignited a trapped layer of superheated gas. The resulting flashover sent a sheet of fire down the narrow stairway, turning it into a vertical chimney. Patrons trying to escape found doors that pulsed and flexed, as if the building itself was breathing. The pressure behind those doors was building, driven by the rapid expansion of smoke and heat in sealed, crowded rooms. Once a barrier gave way, whether a door forced open or a window shattered, the sudden rush of oxygen fed the fire even more, sending flames surging into new areas. The club's ventilation system, designed for comfort, now worked against survival. Methyl chloride from the air conditioning mixed with burning lacquer and fiberboard, producing toxic gases that spread ahead of the flames. In under 5 minutes, the entire interior was engulfed. The combination of blocked exits, false ceilings, and pressurized gases turned an ordinary fire into a phenomenon that even seasoned investigators struggled to explain. The physical evidence pointed to a disaster, shaped not just by flammable decor, but by the building's hidden architecture and the invisible currents of air and pressure that moved through it. Staff members who knew the club's back corridors moved quickly once the first smoke appeared. Some slipped through service passages and side doors, bypassing the bottlenecks that trapped patrons. Others vanished into areas that regular guests never saw, leaving behind questions about who warned whom and when. Dispatch logs from that night record confusion over how the alarm was first raised. Some entries suggest the fire was called in by a patron. Others say a staff member already outside raised the alarm. The official timeline remains tangled, with precious minutes lost in the chaos of overlapping reports. At the city's hospitals, doctors faced a medical puzzle. Autopsy reports listed not just burns and asphyxiation, but unusually high levels of carbon monoxide and cyanide in many victims. These toxic gases, produced when synthetic materials like pyroxylin and certain lacquers burn, caused rapid collapse and left survivors with lingering neurological problems. Some who escaped the flames later developed symptoms such as confusion, memory loss, and breathing trouble, symptoms that puzzled physicians trained to expect only smoke inhalation. Medical staff debated cause of death in dozens of cases, unable to agree on whether the victims died from heat, suffocation, or the invisible poisons in the air. Survivor accounts, filtered through hospital records and family letters, describe a strange aftermath. People who seemed unharmed at first grew weak hours later. The city's emergency rooms, already stretched by wartime shortages, struggled to treat injuries that did not fit the usual patterns. The toxic legacy of the Coconut Grove fire extended far beyond the night itself, raising questions about what exactly had filled the club's air when the flames swept through. Within days of the fire, investigators searching for answers ran into a wall of missing paperwork. The blueprints for the club's recent renovations, essential for understanding the building's fatal layout, were nowhere to be found in city archives. Inspection logs from the weeks before the disaster showed signs of hasty corrections. Pages bore mismatched handwriting, altered dates, or simply ended mid-sentence. Some documents referenced witness statements and employee interviews that never surfaced in the final official files. Insurance companies, facing the largest nightclub disaster in American history, launched their own inquiries. Yet key details from those investigations were never released. Adjuster reports which might have shed light on the building's materials or the club's operational history remained sealed or missing. Even employee personnel files disappeared in the weeks after the fire, records that could have revealed training gaps, safety instructions, or prior warnings. When the legal reckoning came, Barnett Wolanski stood trial for manslaughter. The court convicted him, but his sentence, less than 4 years for 492 deaths, fell short of public expectations. He was released from prison just weeks before his own death. Meanwhile, the city moved quickly to pass new fire codes, banning revolving doors as primary exits and tightening regulations for public venues. The official record closed quickly, but the gaps left behind, missing blueprints, altered logs, and silent insurance files, remain warning signs. For those who seek to understand the true cost of the Coconut Grove fire, the evidence checklist is as notable for what is absent as for what survived. Today, thousands of public spaces still operate under codes written in the aftermath of this fire, yet shortcuts and overlooked violations persist. As cities grow denser and memories fade, the lesson is clear: safety depends on transparency, not reputation. The unresolved questions of Coconut Grove remain a warning. Every locked door and missing record echoes forward, shaping the risks we accept when trust replaces vigilance. Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts below.